Good morning. Hemshech Chaim Beis, the conclusion and the core and the source text is the mimer that we're learning now in Torah Ohr, namely Mik Hashem Elokeinu Magbil L'Shavas. So we learned that mimer. Now we're in the middle of the beer explanation of that mimer in Torah Ohr. We are on page 39c, column C. Let's review what we learned yesterday and then continue. This learning, of course, is in honor of our holy brothers and sisters in the Holy Land, especially the hostages. May they be released speedily, unscathed, and may they be freed unscathed. And in honor of our mighty soldiers, military on the front lines, and for the protection of men, women, and children all over the world. Many of them have gathered in a march now in Washington. May that go well. We are all with them, all united in this show of solidarity, of Jewish eternity. And we shall prevail. So in the course of that, we'll do our learning. So as I said, we began the beer in Torah Ohr, where the Alter Rebbe presented two introductions. One, that there's Shemen in everything. And the second is, what is Torah Ohr? What is the exact dynamics of drawing down Ohr Ein Sof from before the Tzimtzum into the post-Tzimtzum. And as he explained in the brackets that we learned, that the psila, the wick, is the level of the kav v'chut, the line, the thread, that is drawn after the tzimtzum, draws energy from before the tzimtzum, but in a way that's measured, kav hamida. This explained there's two levels in that. There's kav hamida, there's knei hamida. The difference between the hidden worlds and the revealed worlds. But regardless, the bottom line is that creates structure. That structure requires a tzimtzum. Because in the Ohr Ein Sof, where there's no tzimtzum, there is no structure, there is an existence as we know it. So the kav creates a structure, but within it flows the Ohr Ein Sof, and through our Aveda, and namely through our connection to Torah Ohr, that psila produces a flame, a light. That light is the light of Torah. So it's not just a limited light, it's the Ohr Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum, especially the Malchus of Ein Sof, as he called it, which draws the whole Ohr Ein Sof that's higher than Tzimtzum to the point that's even higher than that. So that way it shines above, so that's how it shines below. And what fuels all that? So that takes us back to the first introduction. So there are two introductions. The second one we just discussed, Ohr Ein Sof of the Torah, and how does it fuel? Through the Shemen, which represents the Chochmah of Klippas Nega, human intelligence, of the animal soul, of the intellectual soul, that when the Nefesh Elokis impacts it, it fuels in turn the Psila, the soul, and the Nefesh Elokis, which produces and leads to Torah Ohr. As he said, to the consumption of the oil. Yeah. So basically, we're taking existence, and human intelligence. Shemen is like the essence, the core essence of whatever it is that you find oil within everything. In our case, we're talking about the oil of human intelligence, which represents all of this world's existence, because that's our strongest quality. It's our superior quality. And instead of it serving its own needs, we're directing and harnessing and fueling, as he says, becomes k'shunikla ba'er shabat legamit b'chinas b'teira er. That's bat legamit to teira er instead of its own agenda. Okay, that was that summary of last paragraph. Then the bottom of 32b, he said, now let's go and explain the idea. We'll explain the whole thing. And he said there's two levels of Ner. Ner Hashem Nishma Sodom, and that refers to the divine soul. That's why it says Ner Havaya, not Ner Elikim. And the animal soul is not yet refined, so you can't call it Ner Hashem until after the Aveda. So it's referring to the divine soul as it manifests in existence. And that's why it's the three things in that Ner. There's the Ohr, Psila, V'Shemen. So the divine soul is the Psila, because we're talking about the soul as it comes down below. Like he said, the Kav, Psila Shemshech Zeru, Abitla Elyon and Sof Malchus and Sof Sheshomu Ascholas HaKav V'Chut. The Kav V'Chut begins from Malchus of Ein Sof, that's the Psila. And that manifests in the 10 spheres, which is the root and source, or the source and root of the divine soul. Okay, that's also because the Psila Yaakov Chelevel Nachlose, Chevel is a rope, like a Psila, a wick. And that's why the divine soul has the power to draw down the Ohr and the Bittul to the point that the Shemen. So the Ohr is the Ohr Eliki, and the Bittul is that the Shemen, the Chachma Shebeseichel, which is the oil, should become Nimshach Achar Psila. It should follow the Psila, the divine soul. And that's where we stopped, which is the third line on page 39c. So far he's talked about Ner Hashem Nishma Sadim. We haven't gotten to Ner Mitzvah yet on Torah Ohr. So I'm going to continue on the third line of page 78, which is 39c. I will mention, I said yesterday I would give the source for the Ayin Beis. I mentioned Ayin Beis talks about Kav HaMidah, Kav HaKnei HaMidah. So it's in chapter 158, which is in volume 1 of Ayin Beis. The exact pages are 312 and on. Basically 312 and 313, 314. Talks about this, if you want to look up there, he talks more in detail about the Psil and the Kana and the Knei, that we discussed here, the Zohar and Pekudah he brings there on page 313. Okay. So with that, we should continue now learning third line, or second line actually, the second line on page 39c, and you can find the pages at ayinbeis.com. Good. So there we have three things. We have the Psila, the divine soul that is like drawing down from Malchus of Ein Sof, the Kav that goes through the 10 spheres, and which is the root of the divine soul as it comes down below. And that Psila is what affects the Shemen, as we learned earlier, and we're going to learn more now in detail, that through these bonus of Shema, Baruch Shem, and Yichud, the divine connection, that the Shemen of the animal soul, the human intelligence, is harnessed, trained, and educated to be directed and be drawn to the Psila instead of doing its own thing. So, okay. V'hinei, and now, Hashem and Nimshach Achar Psila, the Shemen that follows the Psila. Nimshach means it's drawn to. Because if you look closely at a candle, you see the Psila is like a wick. The wick, whether it's cotton or whatever it's made of, material it's made of, it serves like, it draws, it's like sucks literally the oil into it in a very gentle way. And so the oil is being drawn into the Psila. If you visualize it, it actually fits so well here. Because the Shemen on its own is oil. And oil is a rich substance, as I said, Shemen within everything, but it's not yet directed. But near the Shemen is going Nimshach Achar Psila. So he says, this Shemen that's being drawn into the Psila and following the wick, Hu Haserif V'Nichla Hakel, it gets burned and consumed completely. It doesn't remain oil. Initially, it begins as oil, as fuel. But once it's entering into the wick, which is a burning wick, and there's a flame, what happens to the oil? That oil gets converted. It gets converted to Ashnas Mene Eish Gomor, becomes complete fire. To the point that if you didn't know, you wouldn't know it came from oil. It's transformed into another entity. Shehu agedem adlokas ha'esh, and that's what causes the igniting, the kindling, the burning of the flame. Harbe, in a strong way, in a powerful way. Lefi shehu hadelik, because that's the force that really is igniting, is lighting, is kindling, and fueling and feeding the whole fire. In other words, take away the oil, so the wick will burn out very quickly. So the oil is fueling it all, and in the process, it is losing its own identity, not losing in a way where we're talking about transforming. Its identity is being lost in its original form, and it's become mamish a flame gamut. Shehu hu adelik. That's the force that fuels the fire. Ad shenisapach mamish liyas keish, to the point that it gets literally transformed to be fire. Masheken apsila. And here's the interesting paradox. In contrast to that, the psila does not become fire. The psila is the place where the fire is burning, but the psila never becomes fire. I mean, maybe at the end of the burning, so then the psila burns out altogether. But the truth is, if you look at a candle, at the finish, when it's finished, burns out the oil, there's always a psila that remains. Yes, it may be charred and so on. Unless you really burn it completely, which has to require a different action, the psila remains. The oil, which initially was not fire, through that becomes eish gamur. I believe in the beginning of the Maimer in Torah Ohr, back on page 38b, I think he said something like that. I want to just look there in the mashal. He said, "Ach, einer b'lei shemen." So the psila, "Shashem noagem lis adlokas einer benachas." Okay. This is a nichla be'er hanechas b'achu kolo legamri v'lenishmen klum v'neshu ele kule be'esh. Yeah, he says essentially, but there was in the physical example that the oil completely will ultimately dissipate, will completely become the fire, and nevertheless the psil is the ikar anel fish the shenechas. There he adds that if the oil and the fire directly, then nikva b'shemen, if it was nikva b'shemen hayikava, yeah. So the psila also preserves that the flame continues to burn, because if the flame was completely submerged in the oil, it would completely burn out. Okay, that's another point. So what do you see here? That once you get the shemen going and directed and being drawn into the wick, it actually becomes so consumed that it will be transformed into mamash the fire, where the psila itself remains somewhat, I don't say intact. We'll soon learn exactly what that is in the nimshal and nefesh alakis. But he says it does not become the eish gamur. That's what he said here now. So now he's going to explain what that means. Now remember, this is referring to the shemen, is referring to the chachma of klipas nega, of the animal soul, of the intellectual soul. So he says, this power that the shemen has, the fuel, because it has this power to create fire. The wick doesn't have the power on its own. Even though we learn clearly that the wick is the divine soul. And Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam, he said, the Ner Hashem is the divine soul, is on fire. And yet, he says, the Koyach Zeh B'Shemen, we'll soon understand what that means. B'Shemen, the Klippus Nege, Yesem B'Nefesh Alakis. Hapsila. It's greater. This power is greater than that which the Nefesh Alakis, which is the wick, has on its own. Like we see, if you just lit the wick, which you could do, you could light a wick, but it's not going to have the same power and sustainability as a wick with oil. So he's going to explain, so how does that work? On one hand, you said before that Ner Hashem goes on the Nefesh Alakis. The Nefesh Abamis needs to be refined, and it's not yet there. But now you're saying once it's refined and directed and harnessed, it actually creates something stronger than the Nefesh Alakis on its own. So he's going to explain now how that works. So this is an addition again in this beer that we did not have in the first mimer, in the original mimer. The original mimer, he did say that but he didn't explain why. He just said Sa'ak Libam. I'm reading on 38c. That it creates a cry from the heart. But he didn't explain the exact reason for that. So now he's going to say, what is the reason for this? This koyach, hulafi, this is due to the fact that the animal soul, and therefore the shemen of the chachma of the animal soul, it primarily comes from Olam HaTeyu, which is a very intense and powerful world, higher than Olam HaTikun. Shulamayla Maila, that comes from a very high level. That's why indeed in Tohu is the Shviras HaKelim, the shattering of the containers, was because the air was too intense. So the kavanah is not, the intention is not to remain in Tohu, but Tohu is a holy world. It's just an imbalanced world where the energy is too strong for the containers to contain, but there's a great power there. So when you can learn to harness Tohu, you actually get more strength than you do through lower levels, because it's lamayla mayla. Ki b'Tohu hayaribu eir, ribu ha'eir, because in Tohu there was a ribu, both quantity, quality of intensity of light. Shezeu yesur b'chinas umida the kav hamida the tikkun. That's greater than the measured eir that is in the world of tikkun and Atzilus. Because Atzilus is a balanced and harmonious world, a functional world. So there, the eir has become more diminished and more measured to fit into the containers. Tohu is more a chaotic world. Chaotic meaning a lot of energy, a lot of intensity, but the intensity has overwhelmed the containers. He's not talking now about that side. But the bottom line is there's an intensity there that's greater than the measured, than the kav hamida, like we learned earlier. The kav hamida is the psila, is the wick, which is necessary because if you only had the oil and the fire, it wouldn't burn properly. The oil would be consumed very quickly, and in general, the whole thing wouldn't work. So it's the psila that actually channels this great fire. But it's the oil that's coming from a place, from Tohu, is what he's saying, that actually has even more power than the psila itself. So why then was there the shattering of the containers? Because the iris, these intense energies, were not biskalulus. They were not interconnected and interwoven. They were one under the other. It says in Chassidus, Kabbalah brings as well, Kabbalah and Chassidus, that the spheres, for there to be a structured sphere, they have to work in a way. There's right, left, and center. Look at a human being. The right brain, the left brain, the center brain. The right arm, the left arm, the heart. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes. But the spheres sometimes are aligned one under the other. Chachma, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, like 10 under each other. But then they're not a structure that stands. That's 10 energies. So in Tohu it says that the spheres were aligned zeh tacha zeh, meaning one under the next, which means they're not really working together. In Tikkun, it says the spheres are aligned zeh im zeh, zeh imin smoil emtza, which is not zeh tacha zeh. So if you took all the 10 faculties of a person and just put them one under the other, they wouldn't be working together. The key to a human being is the harmony and the coordination of many different forces that are working with each other. But that doesn't take away from the intensity of Tohu. As a matter of fact, in some places it says it's because of the intensity that they don't work with each other, because they don't tolerate each other. We learned that at length in volume 1 in Ayin Beis at the end. Like the Talmidei Rabbi Akiva that did not respect one another, did not show respect for one another. It was because of their strength. They were so intense and consumed with their own approach, they could not tolerate another approach, which ended up causing destruction, actually. But it's still due to their intensity, not to their weakness. So bottom line is, he's saying this shemen that he's talking about, this koyach b'shem klipas nega, which is more than the wick of the animal soul, is because it's rooted, it's ikre me'elam ateu. And he explains what I just said, the hainu. Since their spheres, however, or one under the other, not working with each other, independent. Because it did not have that interconnectivity, iskalus, when things work and are integrated and interconnected. Va'iskalus atikun shenimshach derech kavim kameshehu beilon. Where is their iskalus? Iskalus is in tikkun. Where there, it comes in kavim, not spheres zetachazeh. It comes kavim in tracks. A right track, a middle track, a right track, a left track, and a middle track. Like it is in a tree. What do you see with a tree? A tree is not a bunch of items, one under the other. There's a trunk that branches off, and then branches branch into others. There's a hiskalus. It's a full functioning structure for that reason. So bottom line is, so we see from this that in Tohu there's intensity, however, there's no order. There's no structure. In Tikkun, the Kav Hamida is very measured. Think of an artist who has a great idea, and then he starts applying his brush, his stylus, to the canvas, and it just comes pouring out. What's going to happen? It's not going to end up creating art. He needs to measure it properly and take all that intensity and channel it into a beautiful piece of art. So that's what Tikkun does. But the intensity comes from the Shemen, as we're going to learn, from the Klippas Nega, which is rooted in Tohu. So this is how Tohu is the birur of Tohu, and how Tohu is harnessed by Tikkun, is really the process that he's talking about. So he continues. Now, before I continue, let me stop here if anybody wants to ask anything. He's going to bring it back now to the Neshama's work in achieving exactly what I just said. This balance.
Is in Tikkun the oil less than in Tohu?
Yes, of course. It says Eris Mo'atim. In Tohu, it's Eris Merubim, and in Tikkun is Eris Mo'atim. It's again the example. Let's say I just gave the example of an artist, the example of a brilliant teacher, but he doesn't have the proper tzimtzum, doesn't have the proper kav hamida, so he starts speaking. You ever see someone who's like a genius starts talking, and he overwhelms everybody? It's like the water is going outside. Is overwhelming the containers. That's Tohu. And the Tikkun, the Ohr is more measured and therefore more limited. Yeah, the Rebbe does speak, and the Chassidus brings the expression, Eiris Merubim Bekalim the Tikkun. That's another level. Once you have Tikkun and it's measured containers, then the containers can expand, and then they can draw even more Ohr, and more Ohr, even from the Eiris Merubim of Tohu. But it has to be in stages. Just like you can't teach Kol HaTeira Kula to a 5-year-old. You have to teach Aleph, Beis. In the Aleph is Anoichi, and Anoichi is all Aseres HaDibros, and Aseres HaDibros is the whole Torah. But it begins first by measuring it, and then the whole point of Avodah is exactly that. That's what he's saying, that you have the Tzimtzum, Psila indicates on the Kav that comes after the Tzimtzum, but the goal is to draw the highest levels of Ohr before the Tzimtzum. But that's in stages of our Avodah, as he's going to explain right now. V'zeu inyan. Any other questions? Any other questions? No. Okay. V'zeu inyan nishmas adam. And this is the meaning of Ner Hashem. We say nishmas adam. So Alter Rebbe now is going to be medayik in the word adam. The word adam, the soul of a human being. Adam, he says, is the letters Aleph, Dam. It's made up of 3 letters, Aleph, Dam. Kamoy. That means, is he going to explain, Kamoy, like we see, Shadam, Seviv V'Helech B'Chol Eivarim. So we see the blood within a organism, within a human being, travels, Seviv, and travels through the entire body, through all the limbs. The blood is not localized to one part of the person. The blood travels through the arteries, the veins, the sinews, the capillaries, to every part of the body. Seviv v'helech means travel. Seviv means it surrounds, it encompasses, it goes everywhere, basically. It covers the whole cholei varim. Nods tchilasam b'seifon, and it's nods tchilasam b'seifon, the beginning is wedged in the end. Ad, meaning it goes all the way down into I guess the toes, the lowest, the most the extremities. Ad sheleke'ev hareish make his dam beregel. Okay, so what's he saying now? He's saying like this, that the stam that travels everywhere is all connected to the point that even the farthest extremities of the blood originates not safe b'tchilosam in the beginning. It's not like it traveled and went off the reservation, and that's why there was a method, a medical method, not used today really. It's called bloodletting. Hakozes dam, make his dam, that they would let out blood from the leg. That was considered a way to healing different parts of the person, including even a headache, even something in the head. So he says, that when a person had a headache, makiz dam beregel, they would remove some blood from the leg because the blood affects all the body. It's not separate. So this blood that flows everywhere is all interconnected. That's what he's saying here. Another discussion about, is this a legitimate medical procedure today? Is it just, the Torah is definitely clearly, it talks how causes dam. And it was used, I don't know if it's used today at all, maybe in some countries, maybe somebody knows if they do any bloodletting today at all. So that's the mashal. What is that in the nimshal? He says, Aleph dam, he says like this, so too is the manner in which the divine soul manifests inside the body. Which means that the nefesh elikis is also consumes and is enclosed within the whole person, and clearly also the fact that every part of the person connects to the highest levels. In other words, though, for example, the neshama resides in the moyach ha'adam, like he says in Netanya, that nefesh elikis resides in the moyach, but it's affected by the energy that flows all over. He doesn't spell out exactly the nimshal, the same idea, but he just says kachu hamshachas haneshama nefesh elikis. Okay, so what do we have so far? That Nera Hashem Nishmas Adam, that the neshama is manifests Adam like Aleph dam, like the dam in the person, and it's enclosed within the entire being. And what's the purpose of all of this? V'akolhu, and all of this is the purpose. Rak, in order only kedei levaran hanefesh hasichlis. Why is the divine soul manifest down below? It's in order to refine the intellectual soul. Like we learn, nefesh hasichlis is klipas nega. Sometimes nefesh habamis is called animal soul, nefesh chiyunis. Nefesh hasichlis because he's focusing on the shemen, which is chachma of klipas nega. So he's calling it nefesh hasichlis. Shetisapech mamish be'esh shalamayla. The goal of all of this is that this divine soul that is filled with divine awareness and consciousness should manifest in the entire being of the person's intellectual animal soul, of the animal soul, in order to refine it and direct and transform it, mamish be'esh shalamayla, that this oil of the animal soul's intelligence should be transformed to eish shalamayla, to a fire above. Sheyemeir bo erein sof mamish k'moy lamayla, that in this seichel anushi of klipas nega should radiate within it the erein sof, the divine awareness, just as it is above. And here he goes back now to Tohu. Remember, Tohu is a very is intense oyer. Tohu is an intense awareness of godliness. The problem there is it's not contained. It's not integrated properly. But now the neshama, which is integrated properly, is affecting the shemen, that it should be channeled through the wick. Ki metoyu mamish nasa tikkun. Because remember, Tohu and tikkun are interconnected. How did tikkun come? We say tikkun of what? It's a repair and a refinement of the imbalance of Tohu. So from Tohu itself came tikkun. Shemakudim nekudim nasa vrudim. In the process, we know akudim nekudim vrudim, the three types of sheep. So the Eitz Chaim and Chassidus brings is the three worlds. Akudim is 10 energies in one container. Akud b'klei echad. Nekudim is Tohu, like he said, points, but separate, fragmented points that are not interconnected. And Vrudim is with a skalolus, where they all come interconnected. Then that's the order. From Akudim and Akudim comes Vrudim, Tikkun. So you see that it's all that it goes from Tohu into Tikkun. And this is the level of the Neira Neshama. We said Neira Hashem Nishma Sodom. The candle of the soul, Shehi Nefesh Alikis. That is the divine soul. Shehi Apsila. That is the wick. Sheikara Neir Hi Apsila. The primary, when we call Neir, is the wick, like we said in the beginning of the Maimer. Vashemen Hu Birur HaNefesh HaSichlis. And the oil which fuels it and feeds it is the birur, is the refinement of taking oil, which on its own may not have been directed here, and the psila is affecting it, that the oil should be drawn into the wick, which is the birur of the nefesh hasichlis, of human intelligence, of the intellectual soul, of the animal soul. Umizeh nasa eir. And when you do this birur, what happens to the oil? Like we said, the oil gets consumed and transformed into oir, into light. Hu habitl ha'elyon canal. That's the bitl of nefesh hasichlis, which on its own can be arrogant, or at least self-consumed, self-contained. And what's happening here is being consumed by the fire, and the fire feeding the fire through the wick. And therefore, that's the bitl ha'elyon that we spoke about before, canal. And this also explains why the oil creates a more intense fire than the wick alone, because it's now drawing from Tohu, which is its power. Sometimes we have the expression, he may use it later. Raf tfu is b'koyach sher. The fact is, an ox, an animal that plows the field, can produce a lot more tfuah, a lot more produce than a human being. You take a human being plowing a field. In 1 hour, an animal will plow more because it's stronger. Raf tfu is b'koyach sher. So Chassidus explains, how is that possible? A sher is a lower level than a human being, because the human is rooted in tikkun, and the sheir, the behema, is rooted in tohu. So it has more power, but that power has to be harnessed. An animal also can also do whatever it wants, and it's the tikkun, that the world of the Adam that harnesses and the animal power. And when you have that, you have more power than the human has on his own. Just another example for this idea of what Tohu does. Okay. Let me stop again for any questions.
What does it mean? Mitoihu mamesh naso tikkun. Tikkun is a result of the Tohu. The tikkun is a correction of the Tohu.
Tikkun, the energies of Tikkun, the spheres of Tikkun, where do they come from? In Ishtalshlus. So he's explaining, there's Akudim, there's Nekudim, and there's Vrudim. Yes, it creates a Tikkun, but where's the so-called energy and the containers of Tohu are in the process of evolution, comes after Tikkun, comes after Tohu. And that's the whole point here, because he wants to say it's not two different tracks. It's one flow. So therefore, some Tohu itself becomes tikkun. That's what he says here. Like from the oil itself is going to create the flame that the wick is directing, because he wants it to be directly interconnected. So it's not just Tohu is here and tikkun is there. That's the flow. Now tikkun is a repaired world, and Tohu is an unrepaired world. But that's the process. Sometimes the expression. You raise a building with a Z in order to build a better building in its place. That's Tohu and Tikkun. But it's the building on that place, and it's taking the same elements. The Svidus and the Eris and Kalim of Tikkun come from Tohu. And Ayin Beis, he also explained it more at length earlier, I think in volume 1 for sure. I think also volume 1, volume 2 also, I think.
But Rabbi Jacobson, does this also explain why Rabbi Yehuda didn't need to daven because he was a master in Sefer Nezikim? Because that's basically saying that he knew how to harvest this tohu into tikkun. So therefore, he didn't need to pray. Is that a fair statement?
No, it's not, because the reason he could do that was because his bittel, not because well, it's fair to say that he harnessed it, yes. But how did he do it? Because of the bittel that he had. That's what was explained of the Shema. When he said Shema, he was so much bittel, so he's able to bring that bittel into Nezikin, into that world of damages. That's what he said on 39b. If you recall, he said Nezikin is after the Tzimtzum, and it's connected to that. Right here. And Rabbi Yehuda, due to his bittul, his great bittul, was able to do that.
Okay.
So yes, you could say that he's the level of tikkun, of atzilus. Yeah. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. He was able to draw down the lifnei atzimtzum through his bittul. In a way, you could say his well, I don't know about his seichel anushi, doesn't talk about that really, but maybe also as well, that his very mind, the Teirasa Menose, that he had channeled his mind, became a channel for Dvar Hashem, like he said, V'samti Dvare Beficha.
But also, another point is...
So 1 second, let me just see 1 second. Give me 1 second. Yeah, that they were mamish bringing down... Yeah, go ahead.
In other words, what I'm saying is also the Nezikim in particular, why that's there, because of the damages is basically, what is a damage? Is overpowering of something that's not harnessed well. So that also would represent the world of Tohu and Tikkun. That's
yes,
point.
You could say that. You could say that the Zikin represents the Shvirus HaKelim.
Correct.
The rooted in the Shvirus HaKelim. He doesn't say it explicitly, but you could say that, yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Thank you.
Okay, good. So continuing on, V'hine, and now, Hatam shenikra habitl hazeh b'shem oir. Remember, shemen on its own could be a yesh, klipas nega. It's human intelligence. When it's being harnessed and being directed and being drawn into the wick of the divine soul, it's now turning into oir. Oir Hashem. Completely being transformed. And he called that a state of bittul. Why? Because you're being, it's the metamorphosis and the transformation from one state to another. And we talked that it's completely transformed, not like the wick. It's completely transformed to oir. So he's now going to explain why is this bittul called oir. The gam, additionally, mashanim shechali de kaloyin Hashem and dafke. That the fact that this oir extends from is a result of dafke the kiloyin, the consumption of the oil. Shahu shenase eish ve'oir gomer. It's that very oil, that becomes a flame and a light, a complete flame and light. Nothing left. The oil has become no more oil. All it is now become a burning flame. So he wants to explain why is it called oir, and why is it dafke through being completely consumed. Mashenken apsila. Whereas the psila is not that way. The wick does not get consumed. It remains. So he's going to explain these 2 points now. And you see again, this is all the beard of the Alter Rebbe as he's explaining different points of this whole subject matter, in addition to what he said, obviously, in the original Maimon. So the Alter Rebbe says, "V'kvar milsa amura." This thing has already been explained, already been stated. It's an expression in Chazal and Gemara. "Kvar milsa amura," when someone asks a question, he says, "I already told you." Or this Mil says, "This thing has already been stated." And what is he referring to? What he said before. And it's again an interesting expression that I would think that the Maniach didn't write this, that the Alter Rebbe actually said it. Because it's not usually how, if the Alter Rebbe didn't say, you don't usually say Kfar Milsa Amura unless the speaker said it. Just pointing that out. Before we also had something like that.
Not all that I told you. It's a known thing. Milsa Amura, it's a known thing.
Yeah, but here I think he's also mean Milsa Amura, that I stated it before. As you see, you'll see in a second. But regardless, the language is an interesting language. That what? That we said that because the sharsha, the root of the oil, of the animal soul's oil, is from the world of Tohu. Actually, I'm not even sure what he's adding with that. 1 second, let me see, because he didn't explain it yet. Let me see something again. I'm not sure what he wants to say with this Kfar Milsa Amura, to be honest. First, I thought he's coming to explain it that way. But he's saying it's Sharsha from Elam Ateu. So is that adding to the question? In other words, you're telling me that it becomes Oyer, it's called Oyer, and it's through the complete consumption of the shemen. So we said that explained why it's so intense, why it's so powerful, because from Elam Ateu. I'm not sure what he wants to add with Kfar Milsa Amura, to be honest. Maybe after the explanation we'll understand it. Right now, I'm not sure what he's adding with this line. If somebody wants to speculate, by all means. Mashinkin Apsilo. Maybe he's referring to the Psila. No, the Psila is not Mateo. Okay. I would be interested to see if the Mittler Rebbe comments on this in his mimer. So let's leave it for now, this line. I'm not sure exactly what he's coming to say here. Now I'm thinking maybe he means the psila is rooted in the. No, it doesn't make sense. He's talking about the shemen is rooted there, not the psila. Okay, since I'm on this eish. Unless he's referring to that he said it gets consumed because it comes from Tohu. Unless he wants to say that because it comes from Tohu, that's why it has to be completely corrected or consumed. Whereas the psila comes from tikkun, nafshecho, it doesn't need to be consumed. Here, because it was so like out of sync, maybe. I don't know. Okay, let me think about it. Ach bire inyan. So what's the explanation for this? These 2 points, why it's called Ohr, and why it comes from being completely consumed and transformed. We'll understand it by what is explained in a number of discourses. The dichta tuva means well explained. In duchta is like different discourses. So in other places it explains, it explains the 2 levels of love and reverence. Ava v'yira. Ha'achas. Ha'ava v'yira shi mugbelas. That there's the Ava and Yira, there's the love and reverence that's limited. The fishir hasogas hanefesh. Measured according to what a nefesh is capable of reaching. In other words, every person is made up different personality type, different structure. So there's Ava Yira that's limited and defined according to Hasagas Nefesh, what the person is capable of achieving. Va'beis, the second level, who ha'ava rabba v'yira atzuma. So initially, when he said two levels, ava v'yira, it sounded like he's going to say there's one level is ava, one level is yira. He actually means base pchinas in ava v'yira. So one is a limited one. The second is ava rabba, a great love, not just tam ava. Rabba means an intense love, a powerful love. V'yira atzuma, and a very intense reverence. Something that is beyond what the nefesh is capable of containing with its own comprehension. In other words, there's what we can achieve through our own energy. So a person has their heart, their faculties can contain a certain amount. You can do a certain amount. Just like you could throw an object a certain distance. But then there's something, an additional surge that gives you the ability to go beyond the regular parameters that a person has. So these are two levels in Ahava and Yira. We'll soon see where he's going with this. The he, and how do you get to the second level? The he haba b'mchinas is banus b'seviv kalaman hamakif. The first one he's going to speak about in a minute, Nafshecho, is like Mamala Kalam. You contemplate on the divine that's within existence, so that arouses a love and a reverence to the divine that's measured, a love and reverence that's measured according to what you're capable of relating to. Every person there, each person there's where. But when you're contemplating on Seviv Kalam, which is makif, which is transcends all the worlds equally, so now we're not talking about sheer, like we talked before, kav amida, a measured level, a measured amount. You're talking about something that's all encompassing and everything, an equalizer. Now it goes back. The first level of Ahava and Yira, that's measured according to a person's capacity, is nikra b'chol nafshecha. That's called b'chol nafshecha. V'ahavta Hashem elikecha b'chol nafshecha. V'al derech zeh hoya Ahava v'yira shel haneshama b'gan Eden lefi erech ha'ashaga. And so similar to that was the love and reverence of a soul in Gan Eden, which is commensurate to its capacity to understand. V'ashenis, the second level of Ahava Yira, what he called Ava Rabba and Yira Atzuma, the very powerful and intense, that's called Nikra B'chol Moedecha. That's called B'chol Moedecha. Hima'oid Pirish Bligvul. When you say something Toiv is good, you say Toiv Ma'oid, very good. So Toiv, so Ma'oid indicates on something more than the regular structure. Ma'oid as Bligvul, unlimited. Hainu, which means she'ein klei halev makil ha'ava v'yira ha'atzuma, that the containers and parameters of the heart cannot contain this intense love and reverence. Ad shenasa b'chinas er makif, to the point the only way you can experience is that it remains an er makif, because you can't contain it, so it remains something that hovers above you. You're in awe of it, and you're in love with it, but it's not containable. It's not something on your terms. It's like more from a distance, or more, you could say more like you stand bottled to it, but it's not in the same thing, like contained on your terms. It's on its terms, not on your terms. This is the level of tshuva. When we say bechela means with strength, chayil, strength. Yatir, that tshuva requires an extra strength. Bechela yatir. Because when a person is following Torah mitzvahs in a regular fashion, not that it's regular, but it's something that is achievable. When a person, God forbid, transgresses, so then you need to have more strength to overcome the problem. And that's the cheliyata, the additional thrust or the additional intensity that comes in tshuva. Pirish yatir ala keli. What means yatir? Not just more, but more than the regular parameters of the container. Now he goes back to, now let's apply it to our discussion here. And this is, remember, the neshama in Gan Eden is b'chol nafshecho. That's a relatively finite experience. But now comes, this is the purpose of Yeridas Seir Neshama Megan Eden Le'elam Hazeh. The purpose of the soul's descent from where? From Gan Eden, which is a divine world, a divine experience. But from there it came to Elam Hazeh. Elam Hazeh is a world where the divine is concealed. In order, because in Gan Eden you only reach B'chol Nafshecho, you only reach the limited Ahava and Yira. To reach a infinite form, Yatir, B'cheli Yatir, B'li Gvul, B'chol Meidecha, that is Dafke B'Elam Hazeh, B'chol Meidecha, Shat Teshuva Ein Rak B'Elam Hazeh, because Teshuva is only in this world. Yafa Sha'achas B'Teshuva Ma'asem Tev B'Elam Hazeh. There's no Teshuva in higher worlds, not the Teshuva, the real main Teshuva. Ki Aydei Ahava and Yira Zu Shebli Gvul. And what's the power of this? Because through this Ahava and Yira that we achieve down below, through tshuva, through our hard work of overcoming obstacles, through this through this you draw down something Gan Eden does not have, that the higher world doesn't have. An infinite divine light that's pre-tzimtzum, higher than the tzimtzum. Mashekin Gan Eden nikra ziva shchina ayidei tzimtzum. Gan Eden, for all its power, is called Ziva Shechina, the reflection of the Shechina, which means a reflection is already through the Tzimtzum. It's already diminished. The Yud Nivra Elam Haba. Elam Haba referring to Gan Eden is with a Yud. But Elam Hazeh is Nivra Behei. Ulechein Yofa Shah Achaz B'Tshuva. And that's why we say 1 hour of Tshuva in this world is worth more than Kol Chai Elam Haba. Because that's what the neshama achieves when it comes down below into a gufa nefesh habamis. So what you see here is that the gufa nefesh habamis are actually the cause, the catalyst, and the springboard, like the shemen, to create a much more powerful oir than the neshama would have on its own in Gan Eden. He's going to spell all that out, but that's what he said here till here. I think I'm going to stop here. He's going to continue more in this theme. Still has to explain why it's called Ohr and why it's stafke through complete consumption, complete dissolving of the oil into the fire, into the light. I think stopping here is a good place to stop because now he's going to go into Chezer. But he's going to talk about this now for a while. This blig vul that we achieve down below. And this is still all Ner Hashem Nishma Sodom. He didn't even talk about Ner Mitzvah and Torah Ohr yet. Keep that in mind. It's all talking about the Neshama and the love and reverence it achieves. So I'll stop here. Any questions?
This is interesting because he said, Ikar haner hu hapsilo. And Apple became, the shaman is the one that is creating the oil.
But the shaman without the wick can't create air. You need to have something that ignites it. So like we learned earlier. So it's the nefesh halikiyas that ultimately influences the animal soul and draws that shaman. He's going to talk about it. We've already discussed it earlier, but he's going to talk about it more in detail as we go in the next column, 2 columns. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions, friends? Okay. Okay, so we'll stop here. We're basically like 2/3 or even more down, 3/4 of the way down the page. 39c, that's page 78.